Welcome to Yeshiva Dav Shir, sponsor Lui Nishmas. I'm Yaakov Shol Le'Abbas Yitzchok. We're holding in Basra Daf Ein Aleph. So the Mishnah on top. Lo yisabor v'lo yisagat v'lo yisashoivach bein charevin bein yishuvim. What does it mean? When you're selling, it's interesting that the Mishnayos is not so clear who divided the Mishnayos and how exactly the Mishnayos are divided based on the Gemaras. But here's one example where the sentence of the Mishnah is almost in the middle, right? Because the previous Mishnah said that what are you not selling with a sodeh? I'm going back to the previous Mishnah, which is in Daf Ayin Samaches al Beis on the bottom. So he said, and now we continue. It's basically a hemshech of the same sentence. And he did not sell not the bor, not the pit, not the gat where you make the wine. Which is the nest. Ben charevin ben yishuv. It doesn't matter if it's destroyed or there's birds in it, or all three actually. It doesn't matter if it's destroyed or not. It's not sold, right? Atkan is part really of the hemshech Mishnah. All this is not sold, but we're bringing this over here because the next part. What's the next part? Now, this goes back. The Gemara mentioned this Mishnah a few times before. Shaila is okay. So now, do you need to have the owner keeps for himself the pit? The owner keeps for himself the nest. What about the pathway to get to the nest? What a pathway to get to the nest? So that says the Mishnah brings the machlekes. Akiva holds he needs to purchase for himself the pathway to get to the bar. No, if he kept himself a nest, he gave himself the way to get there. Right? So this is why the Gemara said earlier, the machlekes is moicher b'an yofa moicher or moicher b'an yoa moicher. Akiva holds moicher b'an yofa moicher, so you assume he's selling it more generously. And moicher b'an yoa moicher is not selling it more generously. Says the Mishnah, was not he says, I'm selling you all this except these. Why? Because you don't have to say these words. Why are you saying these words? These extra words are telling you that he's taking the derech, is keeping the way for himself. Now, what happens is the flip side of the case. Right? This is what the Gemara mentioned before. So why I have to give you both cases? To tell me that really you're going based on the svara of Ein Yafo and not because of any other svaras you could think of. What is, maybe it will be a different between a seller and a buyer. You want to say, you always go with the same idea. What's the idea? What happens if he sold the nest or the pit to somebody else? The buyer doesn't have to take it there. Why again? I'm assuming the seller was generous. He sold him a nest. He sold him the way to get to the nest. Why? No. I sold you the nest. I sold you the pit. I did not sell you the pathway to get there.
But not necessarily. We had this before. You can't say behind your and Ein Yafa because he's selling it to different people. So it's Ein Yafa.
No, it's to one person.
No, he just says a moicher.
He has his own. He sold him one thing. Sold him only one pit. Here's the classic case. He kept the field himself, and he sold the pit to somebody else.
Right.
Only pit.
Only the pit.
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't sell one thing.
No. We're talking about the same. What he only sold the pit. This Mishnah we quoted a few times already because this is the classic case of moicher b'an yafa moicher. I'm selling it. How would you include in a sale? Says the Mishnah. That's only by a seller. When you give everything. Why? Because here's the Mishnah says like this. When brothers split the inheritance, so you zoiche basade, you zoiche by everything. Meaning, even with the bor, the gat, the shover, you do it. Why? So explain the Rashbam and Taisis. Because the way they're doing it is called a stalkus. Meaning two brothers are splitting the inheritance. So one is taking the field with everything in the field, and the other one is taking the house with everything in the house. It's not that I'm selling it to you one part or not. That's we're mistalik from each other. Someone who takes over the nichse agir, He holds on to the field, he holds on to the whole thing, because nobody is there to protest. There's nobody left with it. It's hefker. So I'm assuming the field includes everything in the field. Hamagdish the Sodeh, someone give Hekdish the Sodeh. Hekdish is kula. He gives everything. Because you're saying Hekdish, as we'll see, the Pashtus means, we'll see the discussion around the Gemara. So by Hekdish is also Be'an Yafa. I'm giving you more. I'm generous to Hekdish. Shimon Oimer Hamagdish the Sodeh lo Hekdish elo eschor v'murkov v'etzodah neshikmo. So it says, the Rashbam says, he did not Magdish the pit or the shoivach or anything else. But by Charuv is different, and by Sodom is different. These were the trees he did give to Hekdish, and he wasn't explained soon why. Let's see. Zog Gemara. Ma'ishta mecher u ma'ishta matana. What's the chiluk between mecher and matana? Says the Gemara, Pirish Yehuda ben Nekoitzol difnei Rebbe, ze Pirish v'zloi Pirish. By mecher, he wasn't so clear. I'm assuming he didn't give more. But matana is clear, so therefore you give more. So then why is it Pirish, Zeloi Pirish? But why is he saying that he was clear by Mecher de Matana? Zeloi Pirish, Zeloi Pirish. In both cases, he's not a Farish. What are you talking about? Hello, Ze Ayalu Farish, Ze Lo Ayalu Farish. Which means, by a Noisin Matana, says the Rashbam. Let's see maybe the Rashbam inside. Ze Ayalu Farish. It's I could say smack in the middle. Starting for the word Ketani. It says over there, Zayla Farish, right above the letter Vav, the Kor Sabach. Because he's used to giving in a nice way. If he's not giving so nicely, he should have said very clearly. But someone who sold, Zuzi Ansu. Right? He's forced. He has a gun to his head. So I don't say he did too much. I wouldn't assume that way. That's Pirush number 1 of the Rashbam. Basically, I'm just assuming that a giver is giving more than a seller. The buyer should have been clear. The Kevit should have said, it says in the second shot, the buyer should explain himself. He should say, I want more or less. You're buying, you're paying for it. Be clear. The fact that he now mentioned it, that means he was not serious about it. But if someone gets a gift, he's embarrassed. He's getting a gift. He's going to ask for more. So 2 explanations. Either shot is that the giver or the seller, somewhere we talk about the giver and the seller, saying a giver usually means more unless he says otherwise, and a seller means less unless he says otherwise. Or it's shot inside the buyer, the receiver. The buyer is going to want to be more specific. The receiver he's getting a present, doesn't want to say too much. So he says, please give to somebody in my house you could store there 100 barrels. No, you see, he can hold 120. So, what did he mean? He says giving only a space of 100, not 120. So explain to Rashbam, so what's going to happen? He's going to take 5 portions of the house. 5 sixes, and we'll leave 1 6 out. Didn't we learn the Noisa Matana is more generous? So because Matana does it with Ayin Yofa. Even though he said less, he meant to say more. It wasn't so specific. As Rashbam says, he wasn't so clear to him how much he really holds, but he meant to give the whole thing. So the Gemara Magdish is a Sodeh, Higdish, Behegdish, you assume he gave the whole thing. Even the Rabbanan said, someone who buys 2 trees in the land of his friend, he did not buy the land in between the trees. Because only 3 trees are koinei karka. If it's 2 trees, not koinei karka, that's usually the rule. The rule is that it's always going to be that you go based on 3. Machar karka v'shiyeh shnei lonos lefanov yesh lo karka. But if he sold the land and he kept for himself 2 trees, he did keep the land for himself. He did. What about Rabbi Akiva that holds that a seller gives more, he's more generous? That's why bor vedut. You're saying, okay, if I sold, I probably gave a little bit more to the buyer because why not? It doesn't bother me. If he sold the house and he left for himself the bor vedus, so he's saying the bor vedus doesn't bother the buyer, so I sold whatever I could sell. But by trees, the trees are nurturing or eating from the ground. They're sucking from the ground. So therefore what? Says in Modafayinal on base, in Isa the loy sheir le melea kori lon chosh kol v'zil. If the owner of the land did not keep the land, so then the buyer can kick him out. When can kick him out? Big machlekes here, the Rashbam and Tosis. The Rashbam learns means not now. I kept the tree for myself. But once the tree dies, look at Loshe Rashbam. The Rashbam says, we saw it earlier, a similar deal. Why did he keep the tree? So he can replant it once this tree dies. The same way you had ownership in Ilona still now. So by a buyer, no, you say a buyer bought only for the tree, not more. So according to the Rishbam, what's the time? The person sold his land, kept the trees for himself. So you're saying the trees that he kept for himself, he wants to keep it forever. So then for sure he kept for himself a little bit of land. If we're not, the buyer will kick him out the minute the trees died. Tosis learns much starker than this. Tosis learns he can tell him right now to cut the trees. So he kept the trees, very nice. But the trees are on whose land? On my land. So you take out the trees, go plant it somewhere else. I don't know who said I'm giving you a right to keep the trees on my own land. It's even today, forget about it afterwards, right then. That's what Tosis says over here. So therefore, I'm assuming in order to sustain the trees, he kept the land with it. And this goes back now to our Mishnah. Says the Shimon end of the Mishnah. When I give a hekdesh to the sodeh, I did not include anything else. Why? Be'ayin yofel, be'ayin raw. Even by hekdesh, be'ayin raw. But the trees I did give. Why? Why Jews did give? So explains the Gemara. That's the reason. Because the trees are nurturing from the sodeh. If he kept the trees himself, he's taking trees that are eating up from the sodeh. That can't be that he did that. So he probably would give the trees to the hekdesh as well. That's what the Gemara. That's the Svar in our Mishnah. He said, "1 second." But if you hold, whenever a person leaves the trees, he keeps also the land. So you can say the same thing over here. He gave hekdesh everything but the trees and the land that you need for the trees. So he goes on to discuss that. 1 second, how many you need for the trees? We pastures the land is only between the trees. That's only 4 amas, but the trees are nurturing from the ground for 16 amas. So what about that? So Tosis discusses this heor. Says the Gemara. So says the Gemara, you're right. Rav Shimon the Omar Rabbi Akiva. Meaning, we're changing our mind. We just said a cheshbon. That was what the Gemara said. That everybody agrees that when you sell a land and you keep the trees, that you keep with the trees the land. The Gemara says, even Rabbi Akiva that says moicher, be'ayin yofo moicher, here we'll agree that you keep the land. When you sell the trees, sell the land, you keep the trees, you keep the land with it. Says the Gemara now, no, you're changing your mind. So we're to the Rashbam clearly learns, the Gemara now is changing its mind. What's the mind? We're changing to what? Rabbi Akiva disagrees with this. Akiva holds moicher b'an yafal moicher. I'm giving everything to the seller, to the buyer, even though I'm going to lose from it. Katzak Gemara says, Shimon dam l'Reb Akiva. Rav Huna dam l'Reb Abanon. Rav Huna that says when I sell the trees, I sell the land with it. It's according to Rabbanon, the moicher b'an yafal moicher. So the Gemara Rabbanon pshita. What do you mean? By Rabbanon or by Akiva? Akiva holds you don't. Machlokes Rashbam and Taisis. According to the Rashbam, he retains the trees until they die.
Which
means for the next, let's say, 5-6 years until the trees die. According to Taisis,
but it's living off of the land that's not his.
right? According to Rashbam, that's part of the sale. The sale, that's what we mentioned before. When you sell the trees, I keep the trees only with no land. It means I can keep the trees until they die, even though I don't own the land. So that's what it means over here. You'll keep it, you can replant it. Can replant it. Yeah, Taisis learns that right now you can tell them to kick the trees out. And according to Rabbi Akiva, you can tell them to kick the trees out right away. What about Rabbanon? So Rabbanon that says you keep the land, it's like Rabbanon. So Rabbanon pshito. What's the chiddush by Rabbanon? I run moicher. Nafkamino di nofal hadashat eluhu. Right? If it falls, you can replant it. So the way the Rishonim explain, the Gemara just is clarifying, according to Rashbam at least, because according to Taisis, it's going to be a little more complicated, because Taisis learned a little different before. According to Rashbam, the Gemara is just clarifying what we said before. Meaning, what's the chiddush over here? I keep the land. My nafkamina, I keep the land, then I can replant it. So according to Rashbam, yeah, that's what we just said before. Because we know you don't have to take off the trees while they're alive. So what does it mean that you replant it? It means you can replant the trees once they die. Once they die. The Taisis is more gishmak. Because Taisis said, what we're saying, we're talking about replanting the trees, just keeping the trees on the land. To begin with, keep the trees on the land. Says the more now, I want to keep the trees on the land. According to Rabbanan, I could. Why I could keep the trees on the land? I kept for myself something. Says the Gemara, so what's the chiddush? Chiddush is not only I can keep the trees on land, they can also replant the trees. According to Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, and you wanted to say that everybody agrees by trees that I keep the land. So the Gemara, that's not true. It's a machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbanan.